There are 5 specific retirement decisions that carry real weight on whether your retirement actually works the way that you planned it. This isn't a video telling you what to do. It's about explaining what you're actually deciding and hopefully giving you the perspective that you need to make these decisions with the full grasp of the trade-offs. I'm Michael Carbone. I'm a chartered financial analyst, a certified financial planner, and a partner of a financial planning practice in Greater Boston. I work with people who are serious about getting retirement right, and I started this channel to help you make better retirement decisions. So let's get right into it. All right, decision 1, paying for healthcare in retirement. This one catches a lot of people off guard, and it's probably the piece of all this that has the most moving parts. Starting with the obvious, if you retire before the age of 65, you're going to have a coverage gap to deal with. How you fill that coverage gap depends on your state, your health, and how your income is structured in those early years. But the way that these variables interact is what most people don't anticipate. But even once you're on Medicare, the decisions don't stop. Which plan actually covers the drugs that you take? What about the drugs that you might take? If you choose a Medicare Advantage plan, can you switch to a Medigap plan later if your health declines? And does your state even allow it without underwriting? What's your true out-of-pocket exposure in a bad year and bad situation? Do you need referrals or pre-authorization for the care that you might need? These aren't hypothetical questions. They're the ones that matter when you actually need to use your coverage. And then there's custodial care, the kind of care that Medicare doesn't cover. I think that the odds of needing custodial care for more than a few years are actually lower than most people fear, but they're not zero. They're not even 5%. So it's not something to ignore when it could very realistically impoverish an otherwise healthy spouse. But with a cost that's very real comes a cost to insure that's also very real. So if you're one of the many who won't be pursuing this risk transfer with long-term care insurance, then it's definitely worth assuming that some lump of money will be needed for your later years. You don't have to assume that you'll need skilled nursing for a half a decade if you don't want to, but it's at least worth understanding as a scenario. All these issues are really important and they deserve more than a paragraph, so I'll eventually do a dedicated video on each of them, but I wanted to name them here because healthcare is consistently the most underestimated variable in retirement planning. All right, moving on to decision 2, when to claim for Social Security. This is another highly consequential and often misunderstood decision in retirement planning. You can claim Social Security as early as the age of 62 or as late as the age of 70. Every year that you wait past your full retirement age, your benefit grows by 8%. That's simple interest, so not exactly an 8% return, more realistically 5 to 7% depending on how long you live, but regardless, it's a guaranteed inflation-adjusted return that's very hard, if not impossible, to replicate anywhere else without taking on other risks. Just take a look at the bond market and see for yourself. But here's where it gets interesting, because it's not just about math. It's about how Social Security fits into your overall income picture in retirement. If you have a lot of savings and pre-tax retirement accounts, claiming Social Security early and drawing down those accounts first might actually cost you more in taxes over time than the delayed benefit would have saved you. The right answer depends on your health, your spouse's situation, your other income sources, and your tax picture. Anyone who tells you that there's a universal right answer to this question either hasn't thought it through or is just oversimplifying it. What I'd really encourage you to think about is Social Security is one lever in a larger income strategy. It's really not an isolated decision. And it segues well into decision 3, which is how to draw down your assets. You spent your entire adult life accumulating these assets across different account types, maybe a 401k, a Roth IRA, a brokerage account, or maybe a pension or deferred compensation. Each one has a different tax treatment. The order in which you draw them down matters enormously, and not because of some arbitrary rule, but honestly just because of how taxes compound over time. The conventional wisdom is spend taxable accounts first, then pre-tax, then Roth last. And that's actually pretty reasonable for the average 401k heavy American retiree. But it's not right. If you retire before Social Security kicks in, you may have a window of real opportunity in the form of low taxable income, where deliberately drawing from your pre-tax retirement accounts or doing Roth conversions is actually the smarter long-term move, in which case you're paying tax now at a lower tax rate and avoiding paying it later at a higher one. And maybe the real question isn't what tax rate that you'll pay when you distribute the money down the road. Maybe it's a tax rate that your kids might pay. This is the point. The best situation for you depends on you. This is the kind of decision that might look small in any given year, but adds up to real wealth over a 25 or 30-year retirement. The tax code is the playing field, and understanding it is part of the game. Moving on to decision 4. How much risk should you carry in your portfolio? There's a version of this conversation that goes, you're 60 years old and you should have 40% of your money in bonds. That's not a financial plan. That's a rule of thumb. And rules of thumb exist because they're easy, not because they're right. How much risk you should carry in retirement Depends on how much of your ongoing spending is covered by guaranteed stuff like Social Security or a pension, how much you need your money to grow by to not run out of it, what your actual spending flexibility looks like, and honestly, your psychological relationship with your money. A retiree with a pension covering 80% of their expenses can afford to be more aggressive than the average person with only Social Security. A retiree with no guaranteed income and a fixed spending need is in a fundamentally different situation. What I'd encourage you to think about is not what's my stock to bond split, but rather how much do I need my money to grow by in order to not run out of it, and how much of my portfolio can I afford to have temporary decline without it disrupting my life and without compromising your ability to sleep when stocks sell off? Those are the real questions. The allocation follows from the answer. All right, finally, decision 5, when to retire. And I know this sounds obvious, but it's actually very easy to underestimate its significance. When you retire determines 3 things simultaneously: how much you'll need to rely on the markets, how many more years you have to save, and what your retirement benefits will look like. Retiring at age 62 versus age 67 isn't just a 5-year difference in your working life. It can be a difference of a very real amount of lifetime income and a meaningfully shorter runway for your investments to recover from a bad market. This isn't an argument for working longer. It's an argument for understanding what you're actually trading when you pick a date. For some people, the math strongly favors waiting. For others, health, career situation, what they're retiring to, the earlier date makes complete sense. The point is, the decision should be deliberate. All right, let's sum it up. 5 decisions: how to pay for healthcare, when to claim Social Security, how to draw down your assets, how much risk to carry, and finally, when to retire. What they have in common is that none of them exist in isolation. They're all interconnected. That's what makes retirement planning genuinely complex. Not the individual decisions, but the fact that they're all connected. The goal of this channel is to help you see those connections clearly enough that when you're making these decisions, whether on your own or with an advisor, you actually understand what you're choosing and why. If you want to go deeper on any of these topics, I'll be covering each of these in detail on this channel. I also put together some additional resources over a website that I made, retirementdecisionslab.com. You're welcome to use whatever's helpful there. And if you want to learn more about my practice, then you're more than welcome to visit our website. Both links are in the description below. I'll see you in the next one.